they would say that for some of the practices, be it yoga, be it talking about energy or whatever it is, some people would say that you could take a practice that might have been pagan or it might have been, demonic, and you can take what the enemy meant for evil and you can turn it for good and you can redeem it for God. So what would you say to people who maybe want to take those kind of things and say, we're doing Christian yoga or we're doing, X, Y, and Z a thing? They have this new thing in counseling. I think it's called like Splonka or something like that, which is it's basically just the Christian counseling version of Reiki, where they just like bring in like Reiki healing into counseling, but say that they've Christianized it. So I'm curious what you think about that. Is it true that we can redeem stuff like that?
I would say no, and the reason I say no is because of you can't. Even yogis in India who deal with yoga, the big central office per se of yoga. I've read so many statements from them because I presented this whole talk on yoga once to a group, and they're I'll have to dig it up, but their statements were you can never separate yoga from the original purpose of it, and the word yoga means to yoke, yoke. What are you yoking to? You're yoking to a spirit. That's the whole point to yoga. I don't think the question should be, can you redeem it? That question is, would you want to redeem? Like, why do you want to redeem a satanic practice for Christianity? Like, and where do you get biblical precedent for anything like that? Like, you can't take everything, because why stop at yoga? Why not just go into the satanic black mass? Why not just go into rituals? And why don't we just go into all this kind of stuff? Because you can't redeem, because when you start trying to do stuff like that, this is why you get Christians that are pro-abortion, and you get Christians that are pro this and pro that are so overtly heinous, and they're not anything to do with it, because we live in this time where we think anything goes, and as long as we slap Christ onto it, it can be acceptable. Christian yoga, Christian Halloween, Christian this, Christian that. And it's like, that just becomes, I would even just say it's just intermingling two things that shouldn't be intermingled. Like, why can't we just exercise normally? And if you just really ask yourself that question, what's yoga? It's a form of stretching. Why do we have to adhere to that name and style? Why don't we just stretch? I mean, what's the big deal? I don't get why. Yeah. And when you're trying to redeem that, my question is, why are you doing that? Like, why don't you just do normal stretching? Like, I don't get it. But it's like a lot of stuff like that. And that's one of the biggest wars I have is with yoga, because they ask me the same question you're asking. We don't do it for the reason we don't do. And then I ask them, well, are you doing the downward dog pose? Are you doing these poses? Yeah, but we don't do them. Well, then you're doing worship poses to Hindu gods and goddesses. That can't be redeemed. I mean, that's a purposeful thing. And you guys are playing the fool for these kind of things. So I think it just becomes intermingling, and it goes back to that verse, what business does Belial have with God? It's like, we shouldn't intermingle those two things. And I think when you're trying to do it, I have to ask, what's your real agenda? Because why are you so hung up on calling it yoga and going to a yoga studio and doing these things for Christian purposes? It just doesn't make sense. It's just, we're supposed to be set apart people. And what does that mean? We're set apart from what? The world and the world system, and it's the world's entertainments and the world's things they do. We're supposed to be set apart from those things, and share not in her sins. And that's what we have to take that more seriously.
When we interact with these type of things, first of all, there are some things that are outright demonic. And I agree with you. My interpretation of yoga or understanding of it has been pretty much the same. Those positions are intended for one purpose. And I don't think that there's, really any kind of getting around that. But then when you talk about being set apart and being different and set apart from the culture, then I think you kind of get into the question of like, yeah, can you celebrate Halloween? Can you watch a horror movie? Which is what we were just talking about. Like, if you're watching a scary movie, do you think it just comes down to the spirit in which you're doing it, the way in which you're engaged with it, the reason why you're doing it? Or do you think it is something that has to be a flat line, like don't interact with it at all? Or is there more of a fine line between, like, I don't know, maybe a horror movie is or isn't as outright demonic as a pagan ritual, for example? Or is there some kind of dividing factor to those things?
When I answer this question, it seems like almost hypocritical, but what first of all, what are you called to? And I'm called to a really weird ministry, right? I'm called to the occult, basically. So it's like not many people are going to be called to the occult to sit in voodoo temples and deal with that, because I would not even tell a normal Christian to go sit in a voodoo temple and try and convert a voodoo priest if you're not called to that. Because I really do think God's power comes within a calling. And if you try to make your own calling up, you might end up, in bad situation because God isn't with you in that calling, because that's not what you're called to. So for me, just the way I was called, and I had no indication or desire to do it, and it was God calling me to do it. And then when he started being with me and we had success and we're planning church, it's like obvious God's with me. So now I'm all in. And so much of my bookshelf is occult. Now, if I went over to your average Christian's house and I saw a whole bookshelf of occult books, I'd have to question, what is this guy really about? Because, I mean, why is he studying witchcraft and all this stuff? I'm doing it because I have to understand what I'm up against. And it's done without a fascination of wanting to practice it or do something weird with it. So it's like all what you're called to start off. Secondly, I do think for your average Christian, and I say average meaning American, basically, because let's just be real. You and I both know most Americans are not biblically, it's just lukewarm, right? Most of it is.
Sure.
And if you're lukewarm, are you able to handle watching a horror movie? Are you able to have those impressions in your mind and deal with them in a godly way? Because it's like, you have to ask the question where you're at in your maturity. And when people are not mature in Christ, that can end up really damaging their life and deal into a fascination, even a morbid curiosity leading up to wanting to practice it and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I even remember when I first started getting into this, I might have told you this, but I was studying astral projection because all these priests were going out of their body at night and doing things around the villages and stuff. And I was like, what is going on? And then I started studying. It's like, this is an occult practice all over the world. People can leave their bodies, at night. And so I had the idea of, and this is really early on, why don't I do that? I can leave my body and I can get an idea of what the occult world is doing and I can counteract it when I get back into my body. But God quickly shut that down. It's like, I say that to say I was immature at that time. And I was, once again, I guess, trying to Christianize astral projection, like you were just talking about. And it's just not something we should engage in. In most of our hearts, we're not strong enough to even share the gospel with someone in the occult, let alone delve into the inner workings of it. And a lot of the movies you watch, believe it or not, they have actual covens and witches and occultists consulting those movies to do everything authentically. So when you're watching those things and you hear those spells and stuff, those are actual things. And so are you prepared for what's going to enter your home and your mind and all those kind of things? I mean, that's something that you should really take seriously when you're thinking about Ouija boards, watching horror movies, going into occult shops, doing all this kind of stuff that your friends might be doing, or you might go into a fortune teller in college one night. You're curious about it. Those things all have danger written all over. And I really would, argue that you're a normal Christian, not called into anything around that area. You're really tempting danger when you go into those places because they're teeming with demons. I mean, they're teeming with demons, and they love it when they see a believer walk in with the motivation of being curious. Because then they got you. And let's just be real. Most of it is based around curiosity, not education or making me better. It's, I'm curious about this. What's this all about? And it offers power, and people want that. So it's like, it's a slippery slope with the occult.